Jai Hind students, today we will be starting with the topic security and privacy, computers and the internet. So these are the objectives that we'll be covering. Initially, we need to explain the different type of computer crimes and what are the difficulties of discovery and prosecution. As you know, we people are very much dependent on internet, the computers today. So it is very important that we should be very much aware, as so many crimes are basically occurring in our day-to-day life just because of the usage of these computers, because we are actually unaware how to use them, what are the pros and cons of this particular. Now, second is to describe the aspects of securing corporate data, including software and data security, disaster recovery plans, and security legislations. Then the third objective is that we need to describe in general terms that how basically the viruses works, the damage that they actually causes, and the procedures which is used to prevent if there is any particular type of damage which is basically occurring. Next, we'll be discussing about the threats to personal privacy, which is posed by computers and the internet. We need to describe the actions that you can take to maximize your privacy. See, when we are dealing with computers, it is very important that we need to make sure we need to be very much aware of the privacy issue, the concern issue, the data which need to be kept confidential. That data should not be accessed by the person who is not the legitimate user of the data. So, of course, if we want to incorporate it, it is mandatory that you need to use different mechanism, even the tools, even we should be aware of the techniques so that we'll be able to safeguard the data, which is of course of an individual concern. We need to maintain the confidentiality of the data. We need to maintain the integrity of the data. We again need to maintain the availability of the data. So these are the contents that I'll be covering throughout this particular topic. Initially, we'll be discussing about computer crimes. Then, of course, the security, the disaster recovery, how we'll be able to recover if there is any type of issue or the data is basically lost. Backup mechanism, pests we'll be dealing about, privacy, junk email, and lastly, the protecting children's. So, what do we understand by this term computer crime, right? It is very easy to understand that when we are dealing about computers, we should be very much aware about the crimes which is associated with your computers. So employees and individuals need to recognize the possible danger from computer system and protect their assets. See, anything which is important to us, right? The assets that we are dealing with, we should be using some or the other mechanism so that we'll be able to safeguard the assets, the data which is of our concern and the data which is important to us. So it is only possible if and only if we basically recognize that what are the dangers, right? What are the possible dangers from any computer system and what are the ways with the help of which we'll be able to protect our data which is actually there in the computer. Right? The hackers or the unwanted persons, they are very much interested in fetching the data. And of course, once they're able to fetch the data, they'll be able to make any sort of modifications in the data as well. So it is very important. It is a topic of the day that it is very important that we need to make sure that how we'll be able to safeguard our data. Now, computer crime, security and privacy, data communication capabilities provides new challenges, right? Of course, we can say that it is something which is going to provide new challenges. First is keep data secure. It is a need of the day that we need to keep our data secure, right? From any sort of destruction, even like there can be any sort of accidental damage as well. There can be any sort of theft. There can be any sort of episode. So it is must that we need to keep our data secure. Right? Data is something which is valuable to us. The assets are valuable to us. So what are the ways with the help of which we will be able to safeguard our data? Now, keep data private. Right? The data which is of your concern, the data which you don't want to leak it out, you need to make sure that that data is basically not accessed by the person who is not the authorized or legal user of that particular data. Right? Like you can talk about salaries. Of course, we want to keep our salaries private, right? So unwanted person, why should any unwanted person know our salary, right? Again, medical information. There are many persons who don't want to disclose their medical information to the other person or to the persons who are not the authorized user of that particular data, because many people are very much interested in getting or fetching the information of others. Right? So again, sometimes medical information need to be kept private. Again, social security numbers, your personal social security numbers again need to be kept private. Again, bank balances, you're not very much interested in telling the others who will actually come to know that how much amount you are having presently in your banks and all. So these are the type of information and the type of data which again need to be kept private. Salaries, the medical, your social security numbers, and of course the bank balance, because we don't want to disclose our data. We don't want that the unauthorized person should be able to access or fetch any sort of information, the information which is a private information to an individual. Then computer crimes, there are a number of ways to secure your data. Of course, you can lock the servers, removable hard drives that are locked when not in use, right? When you are not using any sort of hard drives, just try to remove it and lock it when you are actually not using it. Third is hard disk drives requires special tools for the purpose of detachment. So that should be properly detached. Physical cages around computers which prohibited the access, right? Again, we are talking about the accessment. So unauthorized should not be equal to access. On to safeguard it, of course, we'll be able to use any sort of physical cages as well. Of course, passwording the different type of files so that others will not be able to open that particular file. Now, suppliers for the hackers are your personal computers, the communication networks. So why the person or why the hacker is interested in hacking your data? They might interested in harassing you once they are able to hack your data. So it is very, very important that how we'll be able to safeguard it and what is basically the main purpose of an individual due to which they hack your system. They are quite interested in taking the complete control over your system. Again, we can say that for the purpose of show off, the number of purpose who generally hacks the data or the system just for the purpose of show off, right? Third is gain access to computer services without paying. This is another factor why many people or why the hackers is very much interested in hacking the data. Next is obtain information to sell, right? If they'll be able to obtain your information, they can even sell that particular information to an unauthorized one. So hackers are individual who attempts to gain access to computer systems illegally, right? Why we are calling it illegally? Because they are not the legitimate user, they are not the legal users. So they are the persons who attempt to gain or who attempt to have the complete control over your computer system in an unauthorized way, because they are not the legal users or legal authorized person to use your data, right? So they are the illegal one. Computer crime, hackers for the hire. Computer professionals hired to illicitly gain entry into the system. Right? They're very much interested in actually revealing initially the weak points in the system. So that once they're interested, once they know what is the weak point in the system, they'll try to enter into your system. And once they'll enter into your system, they'll do what they want to do with your system or the data which is inside your system, right? So we need to protect the points, may not alter its own employees of the testing. Again, there are Tiger teams, there are intrusion testers, right? What is intrusion? Any type of abnormal activity, if it is occurring into the system or into the network, that is basically an intruder, right? They intrude your system, and again, there are basically testers related to the intrusion. There are white hat hackers as well. So how can system be easily compromised, right? Why the system is easily compromised, with which we can say that the data which is there in the system is basically not the safeguarded data. First is the social engineering, that con artists persuade others to give away their password over the phone, right? Even the phone, on phone calls only we need to give our like passwords and also due to the social engineering, we can say that the systems can very easily be compromised. 7 is again electronic pickpockets use computers to transfer or change assets to their advantage. That is another reasons due to which we can say that the systems can very easily be compromised. We are using your computers, we are using our system, we are using our personal computers to transfer or to change the valuable information just for the purpose of an advantage. So before doing any type of communication over the phone, over to your system or the network that you are dealing with, make sure that it is very much safe, make sure that it is very, very secure, then only just transmit your information. So there are, you can say, like frequently reported crimes, right? In the field of computers, there are a number of different crimes day by day the crimes is basically increasing, because our life, we cannot actually imagine our today's life without the use of computers, right? We are actually using the computers or the system in a day-to-day life, and due to that very reason also, I mean, I'm not saying that we should not use computers. Of course, it is something which makes our life very, very easy, right? We are very much dependent on it. But again, the crimes, the hackers, the person who is not the legitimate users, they are quite interesting in going and fetching the data of your system, which actually they are not authorized to. So we should be very much aware of different type of crimes which are presently occurring. Right? Credit card frauds are basically increasing today, day by day, you can say. Numbers captured and used fraudulently. Then again, data communication fraud generally is basically increasing these days. Piggy bank on someone else's networks, office networks for personal purposes, computer directed diversions or funds, right? Again, unauthorized access to computer files. So what we are actually interested in, that only the legitimate, only the authorized person should be able to access the files which is there in the computer. Unauthorized, unlegitimate user should not be able to access the computer files. Accessing confidential employee records. Many people are very much interested in fetching the records and again the confidential data from a particular file, right? Theft or trade secrets and product pricing, unlawful copying and again copyrighted software, casual sharing of copyrighted software, assembly line copying. So these are the different, computer crimes which is basically occurring in a day-to-day life. So we should be very much aware, and we should be aware of the techniques with the help of which we'll simply try to lower if this type of crimes are basically occurring. Now, first is your bomb. What is bomb? It is basically the program which trigger any type of damage to your system, right? And it is scheduled to run at a later date. So it's not like that once you have, programmed in such a way that it is going to work right now only. You can schedule it at a later date also. May be found in software for general public, the general public software that we generally used to use, especially your shareware too. And again, data diddling. What is this? Changing data before or as it enters into the system, right? Once the data is going to enter into a system, it is basically going to change that particular piece of the data. Third is the denial of service attack, which is considered as one of the most important attack, and it is referred to as DOS attack as well. Hackers bombard a site with more requests for service that it can possibly handle, right? There's basically the capacity that a particular site can handle. So what is basically the purpose of the hackers? They'll simply overload that particular server by sending more data to that server, right? So hackers bombard the site with more data, with more requests for the service, whatever is the capacity to handle at that particular node. So it is something which prevents legitimate user from accessing that particular site. Appearance of requests coming from many sites simultaneously, right? So requests are coming from different number of sites. So basically the services are actually denied. Services are denied to whom? Services are basically denied to the legitimate user, right? So we are interested that legitimate user should be able to access your data, but due to the you can say the overloading, or due to sending more type of request to that particular service, it is denying the services. It is denying the services to the legitimate users. Then again, piggy banking, original users does not sign off properly. So it is a mandatory and a very important point that original users should always sign off properly once the work is properly done. Right? So it is a major cause due to which the unwanted get access to your system, and if they are going to access your system, and if an individual has actually not signed off properly, they'll be able to fetch whatever the data they want to fetch. Second is intruder gains access to files via the original user ID. What is the reason behind that? The reason behind it is because the original user does not sign off properly. So it is always suggested that proper original user should sign off properly. Again, trapdoors, illicit programs left within a completed legitimate program, right, permits unauthorized and unknown entry to the program. What is trapdoor? It is going to permit unauthorized, that means who is not the authorized one, and unknown entry to the program. And of course, their main intention is once they'll be able to enter it, they'll do whatever they want to do with the data and the files which is there in the system. Then comes is the Trojan horse, illegal instructions placed inside the legitimate program. right? Not the legal instructions, but the illegal instructions are basically placed inside the legitimate programs. Programs does something useful and destructive at the same time, right? So it is quite destructive too. Zapping software to bypass security system. Then again, discovery. Discovery is quite difficult, right? Accidental discovery. And again, 85% of the computer crimes are never reported. That is actually the main reason that different type of crimes which is actually occurring in a day-to-day life, the computer crimes, they are never being reported. So it is must that if any sort of crime is basically occurring, you need to report it properly. Then comes the prosecution. Legal representatives again lack technical knowledge to understand that crime. So it is mandatory that we should be very much aware about different type of crimes. What are the legal representatives? We are not very much technically qualified. If a person is not very much technically qualified, definitely they can be a victim of any of this type of crime. So we should be aware of it. We should be very much aware of any type of legal representations, so that we'll be able to understand what are the consequences that we can have later on. Then there is a Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which was developed in the year 1986. Computer criminals subject to any type of fines, right, depending on at what level the crime has been taken place. So any type of fines in terms of monetary we are talking about. Second comes is the jail time. If a major type of fraud has basically occurred in the field of computers and all, again there is a provision of sending an individual to the jail as well. Then again, confiscation of the hardware. If any type of hardware is basically stolen, then again we'll try, or there's basically the law which is going to confiscate the hardware which has actually been taken away, supplemented by the state statutes. So there are different type of crimes which is basically reported, and based on the type of issues which is basically occurring, different type of fines, the jail time and confiscation of the hardware generally used to take place. Then computer forensics is there, uncovering computer stored information which is suitable for the legal use, right? For the purpose of legal use, which is suitable for the legal use, we are trying to uncover different type of computer stored informations. Then comes as a very, very important term, which is security, right? What is security? Why there is a need for securing the data? System of safeguard, which is designed to protect a computer system and data from deliberate or accidental damage. We are very much interesting in safeguarding and in securing the data which is there at your system. Okay, so different mechanisms need to be known, different factors need to be known, due to which this is something which plays a very, very important role. There can be any type of natural disaster. There can be any type of fire which can occur. So how we'll be able to secure the system and the organization and the area that actually we are dealing with, right? Any type of accidents may occur. Any type of vandalism may occur. So what is the mechanism with the help of which we'll be able to safeguard the data, safeguard the system, safeguard the computers that you will be dealing with, so that even if any type of measures or harmful effects are basically occurring, we will be able to fetch our data. And of course, in terms of privacy, the data need to be kept private. Again, any type of theft, if it is occurring, how we'll be able to safeguard the system from any type of theft or destruction of data. What we want, that the data should not be used or accessed by the unwanted person. And again, during the transmission, during the network also, there is a possibility that data is basically accessed by the unwanted person. So how we'll be able to make sure that even during the transmission, the data is not actually hampered or used by the unwanted person. Again, there is industrial espionage, and again the hackers whose main aim is to hack your data. And we have already studied that what is basically the main purpose of an hacker. Why hacker is interested in hacking your data? Why they want to hack your data? Sometimes for the purpose of money, sometimes they simply want to show off. So there can be any type of reasons due to which hackers are very interested in hacking your data. Then comes is the identification and access. So provide access to authorized individual only. It is a mandatory point that a proper type of access need to be provided only to the authorized user. The unauthorized user, the illegitimate user should not be able to access your data at any cost. Only the legitimate user will be able to access your data, right? That is something which is actually done with the help of your access control mechanism, right? What is access control mechanism? With the help of which you'll be able to control the access whosoever is accessing your system. So only the legitimate user, only the authorized user should be able to access your system. The person who is not the legitimate user or the unwanted person or the hacker should not be able to access your system. So proper identification need to be done. Proper access control mechanism need to be done, based on which the permission need to be granted so that the individual will be able to access the files which is there in the system. Uses one or the more ways of the following systems. What are those different ways? What you have, what actually do you have, what you know, what you do, and what you are. So any of the following way system or any of the following ways can be used for this very purpose, that we should be make sure that what actually you are, what you want to do, what you know, what you have. So proper based on the proper identification, we'll make sure that only the legitimate user or the authorized person will be able to access your system as well as the data which is there in your system. Now, let's discuss it a little bit in more. What you have, you might be having some sort of key, okay, with the help of which you need to provide that key, and then only you will be able to access the data in your system. You need to provide some sort of badge based on which a proper identification of an individual can be done, based on which accessment of the data can be there. Again, some sort of token need to be provided which is going to prove your authenticity of accessing your data. There can be any type of plastic cards like the magnetized strips and all, which is again going to provide the authenticity. Active badges, signal bearers locations using the infrared signal. So these are the different ways with the help of which you can make sure, and you need to provide this information which will make sure that the person is the legitimate user and the person should able to access the data in the system, because he or she is the one who is providing all this type of information. Then what you know, what actually you know, of course your password you know, and that is generally recommended that don't ever share your password with anybody else. If a person knows your password, definitely an individual will be able to access your system as well. So even telephonically, even writing it somewhere, we used to note down this type of things in any on a piece of paper and all. So if unwanted persons comes to access, or if unwanted persons basically have a view or a look over it, they can definitely access your system. So you definitely know your passwords. Identification number, this is again something which is very, very private, and that again need to be kept private. And again the combination of what? Combination of password, combination of identification number. So it is important, it is mandatory that don't ever share your password, don't ever share your personal numbers, don't ever share your PIN numbers, your when you are accessing or when you are using your ATM cards, and don't ever try to share this type of information, because whosoever will be having, they'll of course be might be using it for the purpose of their own sake. Now what you do, verifying the signature. Software verifies scanned and online signature. You might have learned about your even I have taken a lecture earlier on your digital signature and all. You need to verify that signature of an individual, that the signature is basically the authorized one is only able to access the data, and we need to verify that particular signature in the form of electronic thing. So that is what is called as a digital signature. Now what you are, right? There are so many gestures of an individual which actually we can say that they are actually not copied. Biometric, if you talk about biometric, it is a science of measuring individual body characteristics, right? So proper fingerprints need to be there. Anybody other than you or the unwanted person will not be able to access the system if there is proper fingerprint scanning and all is done. So it is your finger, it is your hand, it is your thumb recognition. Nobody else will be able to copy it. So only the authorized will be able to do it or to use it. Then again, of course, the voice patterns that need to properly match. Again, the iris or the retina of a particular eyes, that basically comes under your biometric only. And again, the entire face. So that need to be properly used for the purpose of identification. See, all these points, if we are going to incorporate in a proper way, definitely we'll be able to safeguard the system. Definitely we'll be able to make sure that there is no sort of compromise which is basically done in your system. So these are small things, but even we neglect these type of things in our day-to-day life, and that is actually the reason that we are at a great risk today. At a risk because our data is not at all secure, and it is due to a casualness of an individual only that the data today is basically hampered. that the data is basically accessed by the unwanted persons. And definitely if one is having your data, they can use it for their own purpose, for their own sake, and whatever they want to do, they'll be able to do it. So just make it sure that proper identification, proper usage, proper knowing about the different scenarios, pros and cons of each and everything should be properly known to us, to an individual. Now, there are different type of controls as well. Internal controls, right? In this, there is transaction type of logs, auditor checks who have access data during periods when the data is not actually used. So there should be some type of check, there should be some type of auditor check with the help of which we can actually come to know that who all are the person who has accessed the data during a particular period when the data is not actually used. So with the help of those checks, we can actually come to know that during this particular duration, what is the data and what is the data which is not actually used. Then again, off-the-shelf software to access the validity and accuracy of the system operation and the output. So different type of checks, different type of controls are basically incorporated or are basically implemented so that we'll be able to safeguard the data, we should be able to maintain the integrity of the data, or the data should not be able to access or used by the unwanted person. We are very much interested in knowing that during the data or during the transaction, during the time when the data is not actually used, who all have access during that particular information, during that particular period. So this is something which is possible only with the help of the different type of checks, only with the help of different type of controls, which need to be properly incorporated. Then again, applicant screening need to be properly done, right? Based on which only the legitimate will be given some sort of entry. Verify the facts on the resume. So if you have got anybody's resume for any other purpose, just try to make sure that you need to verify whatever is written on the resume. Definitely anybody could come and say you that I'm so and so, somewhat like that. So it is your responsibility, or it is the responsibility of an individual who is dealing with it, that you need to verify what are the facts on the resume. Because today you can say that there are a number of people who write the type of information which is not a real information. They give you false information. So again, there are different type of police checks, there are cross checks which is basically required. We need to verify the facts on the proper resume. And again, background checks again plays a very, very important role. Proper background of an individual should be properly known. So it is basically generally done when you go for any type of government jobs and all. So you'll be able to find out that police verification need to be done, a background check needs to be done. You need to provide all your credentials, you need to provide all your basic informations, like your like the details and all, degrees and all. So they need to be properly done, and then only we can say that a proper screening has been done and the person who is associated with this is the legitimate person. Then again, built-in software production, record unauthorized access attempts. If there is any unauthorized type of attempt which is occurring, try to record that particular type of unauthorized attempt, or try to make a system in such a way so that if there is any unwanted type of activity which is there, which is actually occurring, it is going to record that particular type of occurring, a particular type of attempt. Again, should be very much aware of the profile of a user. What is actually the profile of a user? Need to verify the different information on the resume, need to check the background details on the same. And once we are very much sure that all the details are okay, all the details are worthy, there is no lie in it, there is no fake information is this, of course, we'll be able to provide any sort of information that the individual is looking for. Then ownership, company if programmer is employee, contractual agreement if the programmer is not an employee, right? A proper type of contractual agreement again need to be done if the programmer is not an employee of an organization. Software again can be copyrighted. So it is something which is dealing with your ownership and all. So it is important to be properly incorporated. Then again comes the role of an internet. What is this? This is basically the global connection of computers, right? So what is firewall? It is a dedicated computer which governs interaction between internal network and the internet, right? So only the legitimate data will be able to pass through that particular type of firewall, and if there is unwanted type of data which is coming, the firewall is going to stop that particular piece of information, right? So based on the internet, based on the type of firewall that you have actually incorporated, the hardware firewall, the software firewall, just make it sure that only the legitimate user or only the legitimate data will be able to pass through that particular firewall. It is something which is going to stop any type of unwanted data if it is coming onto your system. Second is your encryption, right? Data encryption standard, DES, can again be used. What is encryption? Right? If the data is basically sent, a normal plain text is basically sent through the network, what we basically want to achieve, or what we basically want to do, that particular data, or that particular plain text is basically converted into some coded form, and that coded form is what is called as a ciphertext, right? So during the transmission, that particular coded form or that ciphertext is basically transmitted, and once it reaches to your destination, whosoever or the legitimate person or the legitimate receiver will be able to decrypt that particular message with the help of the proper key. And with the help of that proper key, if they'll be able to decrypt it, they'll actually be getting the main plain text, right? So that is basically the process of decryption. Encryption is basically the process which is done at your sender end, in which the plain text is converted. Plain text means the normal message, right? So it is basically converted into some coded message. That coded message is basically called as a ciphertext. And during the transmission, if the hacker actually comes to know about your the message, that is basically the coded message, that person will not be able to decode that particular message. So at the end, the receiver will only, or the proper receiver will only be able to decrypt your message, so that the ciphertext is basically converted into your plain text. Thank you, students. Rest we'll discuss in the next class.